vegetables, etc. Who defines food? Since bacteria in the rumens of cows destroy unsaturated fatty acids, but don't harm vitamin E, it seems reasonable to suppose that beef and milk would have a better ratio of vitamin E to unsaturated fats than do the plants eaten by the cows. Toxic pesticides are found in higher concentrations in the urine and fat of slaughtered animals than in their livers, since the livers are detoxifying the chemicals and causing them to be excreted. Presumably, the animal's livers will perform the same detoxification reactions with the phytotoxicants that occur naturally in their diet. Not long ago, breastfeeding was socially unacceptable in the United States, and several manufacturers were teaching the world's poorest women to use their baby food formulas, even when there was no clean water for its preparation. Industrialists have campaigned to convince the public that their byproducts, from cotton seed oil to shrimp shells, are health foods. In several parts of the world, desperately poor people sometimes eat clay, and even clay has been promoted as a health food. Almost anything becomes food when people are under economic and social pressure. If these things aren't acutely toxic, they can become part of our normal diet. Our instincts give us a few clues about our nutritional needs, such as thirst, the hunger for salt, the pleasantness of sweet things, and the unpleasantness of certain odors or very acrid or bitter tastes. People who are constitutionally unable to taste certain bitter chemicals find certain vegetables less objectionable. Their instinctive guidance has become less clear. But within the boundaries of cravings and disgust, habits and customs become the dominant forces in diet. Professional dietitians and other experts primarily function as enforcers of cultural prejudice. The manufacturers of pureed vegetables for babies used to put large amounts of salt, sugar, and monosodium glutamate into their products because the added chemicals served as instinctual signals that made the material somewhat acceptable to the babies. There was no scientific basis for providing these vegetables to babies in a form that they would accept, but it was a profitable practice that was compatible with the social pressure against prolonged breastfeeding. Poor people, especially in the spring when other foods were scarce, have sometimes subsisted on foliage such as collard and poke greens, usually made more palatable by cooking them with flavorings, such as a little bacon grease and lots of salt. Eventually, famine foods can be accepted as dietary staples. The fact that cows, sheep, goats and deer can thrive on a diet of foliage shows that leaves contain essential nutrients. Their minerals, vitamins, and amino acids are suitable for sustaining most animal life, if a sufficient quantity is eaten. But when people try to live primarily on foliage, as in famines, they soon suffer from a great variety of diseases. Various leaves contain anti-metabolic substances that prevent the assimilation of the nutrients, and only very specifically adapted digestive systems, or technologies, can overcome those toxic effects. Some plants have specific pests such as insects, that have adapted to be resistant to that plant's toxins, but if the plant and its predator are to survive, there has to be a balance between the plant tissue's digestibility and its toxicity. Injury of a plant stimulates it to make increased amounts of its defensive chemicals. Plant toxins are known to be specific for animal tissues. For example, a toxin will inhibit the action of an enzyme from an animal, but a plant enzyme that catalyzes the same reaction won't be affected. Plant defensive chemicals can have beneficial uses as drugs. Plants are important sources for chemicals used in chemotherapy of cancer, with the purpose of stopping cell division. Other plant drugs can stimulate cell division. The drug from one plant will sometimes protect cells against the toxic effects of another plant. The use of any drug that isn't a natural part of animal physiology will have many biological effects, so that a beneficial drug action will usually be accompanied by unwanted side effects. An antioxidant may turn out to disrupt the endocrine system. An anti-inflammatory drug may be mutagenic or carcinogenic. A particular plant will have a variety of defensive chemicals with specific functions. Underground, the plant's roots and tubers are susceptible to attack by fungi and nematodes. The leaves, stems, and seeds are susceptible to attack by insects, birds, and grazing animals. Since the plant's seeds are of unique importance to the plant and contain a high concentration of nutrients, they must have special protection. Sometimes this consists of a hard shell, and sometimes of chemicals that inhibit the animal's digestive enzymes. Many plants have evolved fruits that provide concentrated food for animals, and that serve to distribute the seeds widely, as when a bird eats a berry and excretes the undigested seed at a great distance. If the fruit were poisonous, it wouldn't serve the plant's purpose so well. In general, the plant's most intense toxins are in its seeds, and the fruits, when mature, generally contain practically no toxins. Roots contain chemicals that inhibit microorganisms, but because they aren't easily accessible by grazing animals and insects, they don't contain the digestive inhibitors that are more concentrated in the above-ground organs of the plant. The toxins of plants include phenols, tannins, lectins, agglutinins, and trypsin inhibitors, besides innumerable more specific metabolic inhibitors, including antivitamins. Unsaturated fats themselves are important defenses, since they inhibit trypsin and other proteolytic enzymes, preventing the assimilation of the proteins that are present in seeds and leaves, and disrupting all biological processes that depend on protein breakdown, such as the formation of thyroid hormone and the removal of blood clots. Generally, fruits, roots, and tubers provide a high concentration of nutrients, along with low concentrations of toxic antimetabolic substances. While nutritional reference tables often show fruits and potatoes as having about 2% protein content, while nuts, grains, and legumes are shown with a high protein content, often in the range of 15% to 40%, they neglect to point out that fruits and potatoes have a very high water content, while that of the seeds is extremely low. The protein content of milk is about 3%, which according to the charts, would suggest that it is inferior to beans and grains. In fact, the protein value of grain is negligible, mainly because seeds contain their protein in a storage form that is extremely rich in nitrogen, but poor in essential amino acids. Special preparation is needed to reduce the toxicity of seeds, and in the case of beans, these methods are never very satisfactory. Besides their specific defensive toxins and antimetabolites, plants are major sources of allergens. The allergenicity of a food depends on the sensitivity of the individual, as well as on the growth conditions of the plant. The use of extremely toxic pesticides has affected both the crops and the sensitivity of the human population to allergens. Sensitivities induced originally by toxic pesticides used on certain crops can probably persist after the industrial chemical has been eliminated, because the immune system is susceptible to conditioning. Many types of phytochemicals are mutagenic, and some of those are carcinogenic. Bruce Ames, at the University of California, devised a method of screening for mutagens using bacteria. One of his graduate students using the technique found that the flame retardants in children's pajamas and bedding were powerful mutagens and were probably causing cancer. That event made Ames a celebrity, and in the 1980s he went on a lecture tour supported by the American Cancer Society. His lectures reflected the doctrine of the ACS, that industrial chemicals aren't responsible for cancer, but that individual actions, such as smoking or dietary choices, are the main causes of cancer. He used a fraudulently age-adjusted graph of cancer mortality that falsely showed that mortality from all types of cancer except lung cancer had leveled off after the ACS came into existence. He described tests in which he had compared DDT to extracts of food herbs and found DDT to be less mutagenic than several of the most commonly used flavoring herbs. His message, which was eagerly received by his audience of chemistry and biology professors, was that we should not worry about environmental pollution because it's not as harmful as the things that we do to ourselves. He said that if everyone would eat more unsaturated vegetable oil and didn't smoke, they wouldn't have anything to worry about. For me, the significance of his experiment was that plants contain natural pesticides that should be taken more seriously, without taking industrial toxins less seriously. Technologies have been invented to convert vegetation into digestible protein, but at our present scientific and technological level, it's better to simply minimize our use of the more toxic foods, and to direct more effort toward the elimination of the conditions that produce famine. Animal proteins and fruits, because they contain the lowest levels of toxins, should form the basis of the diet. Not all fruits, of course, are perfectly safe. Avocados, for example, contain so much unsaturated fat that they can be carcinogenic and hepatotoxic. Protein deficiency itself contributes to the harm done by toxins, since the liver's ability to detoxify them depends on adequate nutrition, especially good protein. In the 1940s, this kind's experiments showed that protein deficiency leads to the accumulation of estrogen, because the liver normally inactivates all the estrogen in the blood as it passes through the liver. This applies to phytoestrogens and industrial estrogens, as well as to the natural estrogens of the body. At a certain point, the increased estrogen and decreased thyroid and progesterone cause infertility, but before that point is reached, the hyperestrogenism causes a great variety of birth defects. Deformities of the male genitals, and later, testicular cancer in the sons and breast cancer in the daughters, are produced by the combination of toxins and nutritional deficiencies.